Hi everyone and welcome back to Raw Green. Raw Green co-host Emma Mee from Green Angel Ventures is here with us. How's your week going, Emma?
I certainly am here with you still at this point, and I probably will stay with you while everybody is disappearing off on their holidays, Francesco. You yourself are going to Italy, but I cannot stop hearing about everybody's summer breaks, and I don't have one, not properly.
Well, you deserve one. You deserve one.
I think I've earned the carbon footprint of one, but I'm not sure I've got anything planned. I think I'll do something very, very basic if the weather stays okay in the UK.
It will. So today on Raw Green, we welcome Dr. Pavel Chenko, Dean of Academy Affairs at Prescott College in Arizona. Dr. Pavel has a background in experimental learning and held leadership positions in academia across both US and UK. Dr. Pavel, welcome to Raw Green.
It's a great pleasure to be with you both. Thank you so much for having me.
And how is the weather in Arizona right now?
Oh, it's not bad, actually. August is not our hottest month, so we've already passed that hurdle, I think, and we're waiting for some rain, so we'll see.
Oh, lovely. It's become tolerable. Well, look, Pavel, this is lovely to talk to you, and education is something that I think is a really crucial factor. It's something I've been interested in for a while. So you've led some pretty unconventional higher educational establishments, but does that mean that we can be really critical of the conventional ones?
Well, I think we need to be critical of it all, right? Particularly at this inflection point in higher education. And I think the reason that I've been drawn to places like Schumacher College or Prescott College, where I am now, or Sterling College or Green Mountain College and other places, is because they are really at the vanguard of what's possible in higher education. And perhaps we can talk a bit about what higher education is today and what the challenges are facing, the sort of more monolithic institutionalized versions of that. And where there might be some opportunity as well as some significant challenge moving forward.
Yeah, lovely. This is something I catch up on quite regularly, sort of friends and contacts that have perhaps gone to business school, they've done MBAs, they come out of it, and those that are fairly enlightened will tell me how the curriculums haven't really moved on. The models of economics that are still being, peddled just don't feel as though they are suitable for the world that we're currently living in. Business models, business approaches and things are. Sustainability itself is sort of tacked onto the side as a sort of small module at the end, or ethics and accountability in business, for example. This was the last I've heard was, barely an hour of a module in something which obviously people are really passionate about. So, given where we are on climate change in 2025, do you feel that our impact and our ability to fight climate change is actually being hindered now by a lack of proper education?
I think absolutely, right. And there are a number of entry points to that question, right? If I could just back up a little bit in the question that you asked, I've talked about this in a couple of different ways that, we are stuck in a particular form of higher education, and that's, higher education specifically I'm talking about, that's my expertise, right? And so we are in fact in a crisis of form. I'm borrowing that term from an MIT designer and faculty member called Mary Oxman, who's done some wonderful design work with sort of biomimicry, et cetera, and thinking about, if you take the form aside and you think about, well, let's design it based on the content and based on what it is that we actually want to design as a learning environment, and not worry so much about these boxes we've already created and that we've had for 100 years. And actually recently I'm drafting a new article on, what I'm describing in, typically philosophical terms as post-cartographic pedagogy. Right. So if there's no map,
oh no, break that down for us. What does that mean to the common layperson?
Yeah, well, God, that's so hard for me, Emma. I get stuck in my head so much sometimes.
For me, a 12-year-old, let's go.
Yeah. But really thinking about how do we map the future?
Okay, great.
And if there's no map, right, and we take the map away, how do we divine what we're doing next? And it's similar to, we're stuck in these sort of boxes. Are we stuck following the same old maps? Or in fact, is there a new approach that, has us put those things aside and say, great, let's bring it down to first principles and think about our relationship with ecological systems, our relationship with sustainability or regenerative processes, with climate change, with communities around us, and say, how would we design a higher education system if it were started from whole cloth today? And that for me is the exciting moment.
So how would you design it?
Don't keep us waiting.
Well, I can't purport to have all of the answers, but there are a number of folks who are right now at the margins of, traditional higher education. We're not at Harvard or Columbia or other places that you see in the news quite a bit, or Oxford or Cambridge, etc. Right? We are often at places like Schumacher College or Black Mountains College in Wales, or the Green School in Bali, or Schumacher College here in Arizona. Thinking about sort of progressive approaches to experience-led, ecologically based, and community engaged and oriented education, which one is easier to do at a smaller scale, but also it's easier to get into authentic engagement and conversation with both the more than human and the human worlds that we're meant to be serving, which I think very often the larger institutions have moved away from. I mean, there's a huge wave of criticism and, in fact, lawsuits and political reprimand or political ostracization of higher education in the U.S., particularly right now. But there's also an epidemic of college and university closures across the piece, across the UK, across the US. And those precede the current presidential administration, just because the framework is not particularly friendly, in fact, overtly hostile sometimes, to progressive institutions of a different scale. Right? And so I think there's an opportunity there, looking at beginning with ecological systems. Right? How do you start an educational framework or experience for students where, in fact, ecology, and that's where regeneration comes in, ecology comes first. And you begin to not just think about minimizing your harm, as sustainability might be defined as, right? And sustaining a unsustainable status quo, but in fact, how do you rebuild that relationship with the more than human and with the communities around you? And to embed that in the curriculum, I think, is one of the first steps we have to do.
Great. So I would love to ask, I want to know why you've centered on that kind of curriculum, and particularly in relation to how that serves a broader range of people, because of course we need a variety of leaders. We need leaders in government and policy and regulation. We need leaders in business, and everywhere. Not just, I'm thinking, fairly committed sustainability consultants. So how does your curriculum serve future leadership across all sectors in your mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, one, we explicitly have programs in leadership. We have one in outdoor leadership as a master's program, another certificate, sustainability, leadership, and management, and thinking about, even at the undergraduate level, from school leavers at 18 through to transfer students, getting them into leadership situations that are, quite explicitly experiential. For us, we have a major in adventure education. So that might actually be, holding a rope in somebody's rock climbing, or describing how to set up a scene in the out of doors, which is certainly a transferable skill to any one of the, sectors that you mentioned, right? I think right now there's a really interesting discussion that I was part of last week about what is skill, right? And I think one thing that that higher education institutions in the U.S. are being increasingly held to, and right or wrong we can discuss, is outcome based. Whether their graduates earn enough, and what sort of metric we're being held to as students graduate from our institutions, and that really reflects on what skills are we teaching. All right. So I'm really interested in, one, redefining what skill means, because often that's, the things that you're talking about. It's how can we break down leadership skills, or how can we break down skills such as coding or sustainability assessment, or, any number of, skills across the spectrum, and then suggest that, well, the type of experiential education or practice-led learning or liberal arts education, as we define it here, doesn't have those skills in it. So I think what we need to do is to redefine that, in fact, we are speaking exactly to the skills across the sectors, and we can do that even better by working with those institutions, SMEs, NGOs, et cetera, outside the institution, to sort of help to redefine what skills mean and to serve both students and the employers.
How do you convince the CEO of a mining company or of an energy company that this method it is the right one?
Yeah, well, that's probably not the first meeting I would take, because I think
But those are the guys that needs the most
absolutely.
to intervene in this kind of areas. So
Yeah. Well, when I first, not when I first, but shortly before I left the UK, where I was head of Schumacher College for 4.5, 5 years, we started to see an uptick in the number of small to medium-sized enterprises that were coming to us and saying, how can we create more of a regenerative framework, vertically across our organization, right? Not just from product development and resourcing and delivery, but also through organizational structure and governance, et cetera, because they recognized at that moment, this was probably 2022 or so, doing a quick survey of the Fortune 500 companies, there were already about 20 of them that were using regeneration as part of their, marketing materials, certainly. How much it was authentically integrated in what they were doing, I'm not so sure. So I think there's an entry point there in terms of using the language that's already people are understanding, the consumer is interested in this. Or the public sector is interested, or private sector is interested in these terms, right? So I can sell more product if I call it regenerative. What does that mean? And so therefore, our programs in regenerative design, or at Schumacher in regenerative economics, or ecological design thinking, things like that, are entry points to actually help rebuild and restructure those organizations from the inside out.
So this is prompting me just to ask, actually, what's the nature of the intake of the students that you tend to work with? Do they actually, it sounds like they might even come from business. They're perhaps already, it's a higher education, right? So they can come in after they've perhaps started on their career path and then realize they want to upskill in these particular directions. Tell me a little bit about what that means to you in terms of what experience they bring in, or is it really just an influx of students who are exploring and unsure as to what they're doing there?
Yeah, well, I think it's always a mix, right? And I look at the last three institutions where I've had the pleasure of working, and one, Sterling College, was 100% undergraduate residential students, right? So a lot of students did come sort of exploring and wanting to understand and wanting to find out what this world was about, and they wanted to make positive change in the world, and we gave them some tools to do that. Schumacher, on the other hand, was 100% masters. And we introduced an undergraduate program later on. And those are, I think our median age was somewhere around 35, 40 for those students who had already been out in the working world. They had maybe started their own businesses, and were looking to transform from an ecological perspective, right, or systems thinking perspective, what they were doing to increase their impact. Here at Prescott, we have everyone from school leavers 18 through master's programs, through a PhD program, and our median age in the PhD, I think, is 45. So certainly people who have have law degrees, some who have PhDs already, certainly master's degrees, and are professionals in their field across the spectrum, from the arts to sustainability to carbon sequestration, performance, etc. And I'm seeing in that program in particular that they're very quickly taking this idea of sustainability education sort of writ broadly, integrating equity and ecological sustainability, so community and environment, and applying that very quickly and very directly. There's some great examples of that in practice that I can share.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd love you to, because I was going to ask, what are they bringing to you? What questions do they have that they have identified a gap in their knowledge or a gap in the market that they see as an opportunity?
Yeah, well, I think they come here recognizing a gap, right? And that's what draws them to us. They're like, well, I've been practicing this for 10, 15 years, and I want to be able to bridge between the human and the ecological, or I want to be able to sort of increase the equity work that I'm doing, and have it sort of have a tangible effort, right? We have a couple of field campuses here, although we have a small campus in Arizona. We've got 900 students total. We have a field campus in northern Mexico in the state of Sonora, and then we have one in southern Kenya that we collaborate with the Maasai, to deliver programming for undergraduates through PhDs. And last year, when I went to Kenya, to celebrate their 20th anniversary of that campus's existence, I had the great privilege of handing out Prescott College certificates to young Maasai sort of scholars who had completed a paralegal program, which was started by one of our PhD students, because she recognized that the land rights issue facing the Maasai in Kenya needed a larger number of educated Maasai that were able to help their community members leverage that expertise, right? Because they redid their whole constitution in 2010, and they're still fighting a battle with the government about land rights, land use, pastoralism, etc. So that's a direct example of one of our students coming with legal expertise and saying, how can I apply this in a context which is transformational, and which which creates a bridge between the ecological and the human.
Well, look, Dr. Powell, the new proposition, it is definitely something that it is appealing right now, and I tell you why. The other day, about a couple of weeks ago, I was at a university in the UK, and I was in this beautiful campus, and I was imagining, I was thinking, picturing myself being a climate scientist and being shouting at the winds for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, decades about the irreversible climate tipping points that the planet it is reaching at faster speed than they even predicted it. On one side of the campus. On the other side of the campus, you see School of Business or School of Law or any other kind of school that completely ignored them for the past X number of decades. Still now, there is not, let's say, a sustainability or a climate oriented or a purpose or a social, you name it, number of modules. Because like Emma said earlier, with one module, what do you do? You need more than that. It's just to put it in your curriculum, if it is. But if you really want the student to reach that level of minimal knowledge, you need a little bit more than that. So I think you are on the other exact extreme of this, okay, which is fine, absolutely fine. I do think the university and the higher education needs some sort of refreshment, because we all grow up with the model that we study, we get our degrees, we get a job after we make a family, a career, we die. Okay, let's sum up our own life cycle assessment. The problem is,
Really depressing, Francesco, just to say.
I thank you. I've been working hard for that. The problem it is that we are living in extraordinary times now, where the universities are under attack under multiple fronts like never before. Free speech, free rights of education, financials. In UK, we know that, I don't know the situation in the US, but in the UK, the situation in university is not an easy one. And the biggest one of all, it is artificial intelligence. I mean, by the time that today a student enrolls into a degree, in 3 years, God knows what we'll be able to do with artificial intelligence. So my point is, if you were a student right now, what would you study? Because, I mean, how many millions of jobs are going to be wiped out? Especially white collars job.
Well, I mean, I think again, there are multiple answers to that, Francesco. And if I was coming in, to university now, and it's been a number of years. I started university in 1988, so things were a bit different. But I would think about systems. I would think about complexity and understanding how things relate to one another. Right. So, one, we obviously have discussions, at Prescott about AI and about its impact on higher education. Even from the now it seems quite mundane of, students are using ChatGPT to write their essays, right, to actually replacing some of the teaching functions and replacing the jobs that the students are being prepared to do. But I think for me, I step back and I think, well, what can AI not do? And a lot of that, although I know people are having conversations and are using AI as therapists and that sort of thing, but the practical, on the ground, experiential engagement with community, with place, with systems, right, isn't something which I think is right now replaceable. It might be augmented, it might be enhanced. You might be able to actually get to the facilitation of those experiences, get to the practice led, more readily if you have the support of AI tools to be able to do that, to synthesize some of the information, create those gateways. But I think what we need to look at, in the liberal arts and broadly in transdisciplinary education is, we need to, one, train students for the jobs that they're either going to create themselves, which is, a preference, right, to become entrepreneurs in this space, right, or to, find jobs in meaningful work that they can help do the change that they want to make. But not to the exclusion. There are still conversations. I'm sorry, interrupt myself sometimes. There's still conversations that I come across even in my emails today and yesterday about, well, we should just ban AI in the classroom because it's detrimental. I thought,
No, that'd be
absolutely
dumb.
not. I mean,
Yeah.
that to me is absolutely ridiculous. I'd much rather explore how we can double down on what we're really, really good at, which is interpersonal, a practice-led engagement, rather than
Unless, of course, the research that has started to suggest that using AI actually makes you more dumb. It stops you thinking critically and
It does.
analytically, in which case actually banning AI in the classrooms might be a really good idea, just as a break from it, so that we can actually then sort of use those muscles.
Yeah, well, we certainly have lots of classes that don't, even give students the opportunity because they're out in a canyon somewhere, they're out in the wilderness for 30, 20 days.
That's an
Um,
amazing solution. Just dangle them off a cliff on a
exactly,
piece of string.
but we can't do that, right? We can't just run away from this because then they come back and they're engaged with this, or in fact, the worst scenario is they get a university degree and they have no idea how to use this tool, which all of their employers are using, and in fact,
Yeah.
their application materials are being assessed by AI and they don't even know what that means, right? So I think there's a basic set of AI principles that we've been drafting here at Prescott College, for example, that we want to equip our students with, but not to the detriment. We don't have courses in AI. We may well introduce an AI literacy course, right? But certainly, it's not a field of study that we offer. We much more focus on the sort of relational elements of liberal arts education.
Yeah, well, we don't quite understand enough about it to be able to teach it yet, do we? It's sort of teaching us, I think, at the moment. So,
Just if I can just add on to that, because I think any technology that comes around, right, and I'm sure we could pick any technological moment, whether it's the mass printing of materials or the phonograph or the internet or the personal computer or AI, and say, there were people at any one of those moments that most likely said, "Oh my goodness, this is the end of whatever." Right?
that was my degree entirely. I did 4 years of a publishing degree. And at the end of it, they told me, don't go into publishing. It's a declining industry. The websites are going to take over and we'll never have books again.
Yeah, but clearly we still have books, right? I think we need to mediate, that sort of sky is falling, mentality,
Yeah.
and say there is a dramatic change, and it will change the landscape of education. It is already changing the landscape of the workforce, but I think it will also create opportunity.
So, my follow up question that I was actually meaning to ask, do you feel that education shapes policy or policy shapes regulation? And which way should it be? And how can they kind of work together?
Well, this is a poignant historic moment to ask that question, isn't it? Because, right now in the States, it certainly seems as though by executive order or, large omnibus bills coming through Congress, that it is in fact policy which is shaping or trying to shape higher education. Um, Whereas for a long time now, it's been higher education where many of the people in government come from, whether it's the Oxford schools or Yale or Harvard or Princeton or those places, and those are the members of government who are now turning around and saying, "Oh, we don't need that sort of education." Or we want to change that education, to be more skills based or more business based, or certainly not woke as some people describe it. And I think that's hugely problematic. For me, who's a leader in higher education, to have policy determine what happens in the classroom and who is able to attend and who's not able to attend. I think it also flies in the face of even sort of neoliberal approach to privatization. And if the idea is to create a competitive marketplace, we should be able to do whatever we want. And then the students will decide, where they want to go based on the services that are provided. Right. So I think there's opportunity again in this space to say, we differentiate ourselves because we've been doing this really, really well for 60 years here. But also we do it in a way that nobody else does. You should come here and study this. And I don't necessarily, look favorably on a government policy, certainly not a federal government policy, which says, no, you can't. Because
Are you against? Are you against a role of the private sector inside education?
no, not
Because
at all.
I don't see the way forward, especially again in places like the UK that they have a dramatic lack of funding. So the private sector could help also bring it that view from the day to day, the business needs and whatnot that can help forge the future generation, factoring in AI, climate, and everything we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes or so. So it is, but it's good to hear from you. Not everybody thinks they like you, Doc. It is we're still we're still. I mean, we're talking about some of the oldest institutions in the world. Some universities are way older than republics and democracies. So it is something that it is difficult to change people's mind when they're anchored to a certain way of doing things.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, again, I've worked at much smaller universities. I mean, now at 900 students, and Schumacher, when I left, had maybe 150 students. Tiny compared to places that have tens of thousands of students and run entire economies of cities because of their size, or in fact, our cities themselves, right? And I think that gets to other sustainability questions. Whether that education at that scale is in fact sustainable to deliver, right? But I think part of what we are able to do is, one, create new ways of engaging with communities in sort of learning opportunities, right? It need not be a monolithic undergraduate or master's or PhD, because not everybody is is interested in that. It's not accessible for everybody because of costs. They don't have the opportunity to spend 4 years here studying an undergraduate degree, or 2 with a postgraduate. So what is it that we could best serve the community with? And I was recently, a couple of weeks ago, speaking to the Chamber of Commerce, so an organization of business leaders here in Prescott, and giving a presentation about the college. And really, in order to do that, I did the research and thought, well, how many alumni-owned businesses or connected to the college businesses are there in Prescott? And there were dozens. Everything from schools that have been started to restaurants and hotels and realtors and builders, and really a cross section of the community. And I had so many people come up to me after that talk and say, "Oh, we had no idea that you were this deeply ingrained in the community. We always thought that you taught some environmental liberal arts over there, and that it was for people from away." And I said, "No, we are Prescott College. We're actually named for the town that we're in, and our primary role is to serve the community, in which we've been doing for 60 years." And so I think there are those sorts of elements where we can argue for, and in fact make the case for, the relevance of higher education, which right now is being questioned here in the US. There's a lack of trust or lack of faith or lack of understanding of the relevance of higher education. And we need to reinstill that and use that as an entry point to talk about issues like sustainability and regeneration and community engagement.
Yeah. So, do you see an opportunity to open up higher education more than it is at the moment to people at different ages and in different stages of their career? Because the world is changing fast, right? And even if you left school just 10 years ago or so, there's probably a lot more that you could, return to learn. So, is this a business model that you're considering more as well?
Absolutely, and we're launching a small suite of they're called micro-credential courses, really, but to give people a smaller sort of bite-sized experiences in whatever it is that they want. And some are more leisure-based or more lifelong learning, or um, for sort of older populations who live in the area. And some might be for upskilling. Some might be for introducing people to new ways of thinking in terms of whether it's sustainable agriculture. We have a sustainable food systems undergraduate certificate. We have a transformative food systems master's program, but we're also partnering with some local businesses on regenerative ranching, for example. Like, what does that mean in the South, in the desert, right? To say, okay, how can I apply more regenerative principles to what I'm doing? And if we can shift the needle in the local population, I think we'll make a significant environmental impact.
Or you're shifting the economy, of course, as well, the local economy, from what you've just said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other examples that you know of educational establishments that are doing things a bit differently, or a little bit more transformative or future thinking that you're aware of?
Well, of course there are. Yeah. I mean, I would be making it up to say we're the only one. And certainly all of the 3 that I've worked at, Sterling College, Schumacher College, Prescott College here, one of the challenge, and many others, we're a member of of a consortium here in the States called the Eco League, which brings together 6 universities across the country, from College of the Atlantic to the New College of Florida to Alaska Pacific University and others, right? And Dickinson University. So to say, we're all doing this type of education, this sort of experiential, liberal arts practice-led education that has an ecological focus. That's the Eco League. And so there are some examples of that. And I think those are a great illustration, the fact that we're in that consortium, which held its annual retreat here just a few weeks ago, that it's a more distributed model rather than a monolithic institutional model. Who can teach what? We can do a particular subset of skills really well. College of the Atlantic, for example, might do another set really well, and we can send our students there to complement their education here and do exchanges in that way. And we're continuing to build an international network of those universities, right? Because there are some really interesting work done in India, for example. Flame University in Pune is one of a handful of progressive liberal arts universities. I think they're about 10 years old at the moment, that are making inroads in a much more sort of government regulated, management heavy university system to a population of 1 billion people. Right. So I'm interested in, through some partnerships through the International Center for Sustainability in London, where I'm also a partner, of how do we get into those conversations and potentially have a huge impact on some real innovation in, the world's largest democracy, right? And to see how we might transform higher education to be more ecological, to be more community oriented, to be more civic minded, rather than to follow some of these models from the UK and the EU and the US. Right? But I think they're examples to your question. They're examples everywhere, but they're usually small scale, and they're often financially fragile. And in fact, Schumacher College, through various machinations of its governing charity, lost its accreditation and is now sort of restarting um, in a new version. And it still exists and it's still serving those same ideals, but for a much smaller population. And I think there are a number of institutions I could point to. Green Mountain College here in the States, where I worked, which closed in 2018, 2019. And many of their students and faculty came here to Prescott to continue their degrees and their work. So I think there is strength in consortia and strength in networking and that relationality and a governance model as much as it's important in the classroom.
It's not easy to make a big change. It is I don't want to imagine the number of resistance, the amount of resistance that, I mean, you faced also with, say, your colleagues in the academia, in let's say expressing, say, okay, guys, we need to bring something new here. The model is not working. Let's be frank. The uni has failed the climate. Yeah, it has failed the climate.
Yeah. And as somebody who's been in academic leadership for 20, 25 years, I agree with you 100%. Right. At the same time, what we're trying to do, and I've been working on a piece also about the limits of incrementalism. Right. I'm a little bit tired of, thinking about how we can change things at the margins and adapt slightly. And if there's a new government policy that comes down, how can we slightly modify what we do to meet that new policy without recognizing that it's in fact a wholesale change opportunity? This is one of those leverage points that Donella Meadows talked about. Like, this is now, we need to change things. So let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is very difficult. All the job that the three of us do, somewhere or another, we have to convince people that this is the right way, this is the right thing to do. Okay, at different degrees, at different level. Okay, at the end, Doc, there is one thing: money talks, bullshit walks. If you're able to show the return, both environmental, social, and financial, obviously, to any business owner, okay, to any policymaker without vested interest, it is something that is doable. So we're still with that proposition anchored to the profit first. If you manage to propose something where you have profit with purpose, quantifiable though on paper, that you can see it, you can touch it, then we might have a way to win, to go forward.
I fully agree, and that gets back a bit to our conversation about skills, right? If we can reassess or reimagine what these metrics, that we're assessing our graduates with are. I mean, you mentioned, environmental, social, and financial. Right now, it's 100% financial.
Mm.
We're literally being judged by the federal government on what our graduates make after they leave here, what they earn in a year, compared to students that don't have, university degrees. And there's some disciplines that don't lend themselves to an immediate high salary, but in fact build a foundation for doing more social and environmental good. And then slowly the salary rises, right? I don't have those numbers in front of me, but to judge people solely on how much money they make and not how much social good and how much ecological impact or what their sustainability factor or how they're regenerative or how they even treat their neighbors, those to me are equally, if not more important metrics.
But can I tell you something? Do you know who's already keeping track of this stuff?
Yeah.
China.
Yeah.
They do have a social scoring system, which is also a double-edged sword because it is an incredible monitoring system with a little bit of abuse sometimes of private information. On the other hand, though, it does in a way, let's say, rewards the good citizens that they do good and penalizes the one that doesn't do good. So are you suggesting this is a way forward also outside of China?
Well, I'm not suggesting we follow the Chinese model,
Mm.
but I think if we come down to it, right, really thinking about what the root of, for example, Prescott, college education is, it's looking at the intersection of environment, community, and practice or action, and it's really hard to argue with, all right, planting trees or having clean water or having access to water here in the Southwest, or having safe communities is a bad thing.
Mm.
And so, through the experience, for example, we have a grant funded restoration project for a creek, a small creek that runs through the middle of campus here called Butte Creek. And
Mm.
there are many small bits of creek which are dry most of the year, and they only have water in them when it rains because that's where we are. But we hold regular tree planting or invasive species eradication events, and people from the community come because we're nestled in a residential community here in Prescott, and so people want to know, how do I do this in my own backyard with my own creek, because I want more
Mm.
birds to come and I want it to look prettier, and I want there to be water more year round or whatever it might be. And we actually had a group of um, sort of early career foresters and firefighters come here a couple of weeks ago, about 20 or 25 of them, for a tour of this really small area. It's probably only about 200 or 300 meters in length, the section of creek that we have, but they wanted to know how we did it, how we do it, how they can replicate that, and how they could be of service to the community doing that. And really, I think that comes from across the political spectrum, across the economic spectrum. It's like, this is really a good thing to do. So for me, thinking about how we can leverage our expertise as experiential educators to help build bridges, particularly in a place here in Arizona, which is a battleground state, during
Mm.
the elections. And this county, I think voted about 65, 70% for Trump in the last election, and yet here we are, as Prescott College, and we're trying to open our doors and sort of build those conversations, build those bridges. And I think there's some success with that.
Imagine if you could build up, if you can model a system, okay, just throwing ideas on the table, which is something that I absolutely love to do. Imagine if you can be able to model a system where for every good social and environmental action that a citizen does, you're able to deduct something from their income taxes or just that. I mean, the results lower your carbon footprint, your annual carbon footprint by 5%, you get 1% less in income tax through the year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just something simple like that, which is quantifiable. I mean, it is absolutely doable. The repercussions and the results onto that. I think we are onto something new business idea, Emma. If we
I'm
can.
not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think there's value and benefit beyond sort of immediate cash in hand pocket kind of scenarios that people do aspire to. I mean, we all do want to live in these places. Ultimately, we do want society, we do want community. I think this is a really lovely sort of grassroots approach to building a newer, better community, and we don't actually see many solutions that sound like that. We hear of sticking plaster, solutions. We hear of fixing this or fixing that, but actually, you're busy sort of just sowing the seed across the entire spectrum. And actually, it's geographical location that is your limitation on this one, because you're covering every single element within that community and society, economically, as well as environmentally, as well as socially, as well as building relationships and trust between people. And as you say, that multifaceted sort of political spectrum is crucial, because there are so many things that are dividing people right now. I think anything that genuinely brings people together and makes them realize that they've got more in common and more goals to be shared is to be applauded, for sure. So how do you see this scale? How is this going to scale beyond what you're already doing, and ideally
Very good point.
transpire into the institutional educational establishments, the business schools? That we need scale with this.
Absolutely.
What do you suggest?
Yeah, well, I think scale comes from relationship, right? I mean, we are, of course, right here in Prescott, Arizona, as an institution at a campus. I've talked about the field campuses we have, which are already, somewhat spread out internationally, but also we've got about 40 global active partners that we're working with. And whether that's actually student exchange, which is, useful for students, and I think it helps to enhance their experience, but I'm also interested in sort of collaborative approaches, or sort of cross-disciplinary approaches in research, in co-developed programming, with schools, whether they're in India or the EU or the UK, or actually we've got partners on almost every continent now, right? So thinking about we recognize what we do here is quite limited, both in the impact we can have on the community here. So how can we multiply that, right? By partnering with, whether it's a small learning center in the highlands of Peru, or whether it's an arts university in Ireland, or a liberal arts university in India, to actually think about the network as stronger than a monolithic whole. So I think one of the solutions, if we're really following an ecological and regenerative model for education, ecology would take a systems approach, or it is a systems approach, right? And there is really no center. I think one example of this is a project I've been doing with the UNDP on conscious food systems. So I've been working with them for the past 3 years or so. And now Prescott College is an academic partner of that group. We're really trying to leverage intercapacities, or the Inner Development Goals, the IDGs, as a complement to the Sustainable Development Goals, and think about, in this project, how to build a grassroots, ground-up global curriculum that's an equitable exchange of knowledge and information and experience across this network that is across 5 continents, right? So working with, I think right now it gets 9 or 10 individual learning centers that are providing education in sustainable agriculture, regenerative practices for their populations. How can we enhance that, right? By thinking about how inner capacities and consciousness works in that to leverage positive change, but also strengthen their position by networking across these different organizations, right? So it's been quite a long road, because building a ground up international consortium of learning centers is not easy across cultures and economies and languages and traditions, et cetera. But now we're in a state where we've got a 6-month pilot project ready to go, pending funding. A minute by minute curriculum that was developed by these practitioners in these different countries, right? So I think that's one great example that I see, that in fact building these networks that are much, much stronger than, I want to go to this university and learn everything. I want to go to this network and learn a whole lot more, and particularly about how people relate to one another in different places, different ecologies, different bioregions, and different communities.
Wonderful. Well, Pavel, thank you very much. This was illuminating.
Except I have my 3 questions that I like to ask them at the end, before you feel as though, because I've actually been itching to ask them throughout, and now I've tried to not, I've held off. So I've got 3 short, sharp questions. I've tried to get out of this before, but for the first time, I actually want to do it. I've got 3 good ones. Yeah, I do. Right, Pavel, these are quick fire questions. Okay, so as succinctly as you can, Obviously, you've had no time to prepare, but they're fun. Right. Question number 1. If you were a student again today, what would you study?
Oh, that's easy. Systems thinking.
Yeah?
Yeah. Systems thinking in complexity.
What's the biggest threat to education that you see today?
Oh my goodness. Politics, economy, hostility of scale to progressive institutions of our size.
Oof, that sounds pretty big and scary, doesn't it? When you see young people learning how to navigate the world, what brings you hope?
Well, I think exactly the way you described it, and it's a slightly longer answer here, right? Watching them learn to navigate the world is, what I live for, right? Because I don't want to provide some transactional answers to things, right? What we want to do is to create opportunities and frameworks for those students to make mistakes, to engage in, real world experimentation, but with a framework so that if they make mistakes, it's okay. So then they can kind of learn their own way through. And that's what practice-led learning really means. Like, do the thing, recognize what you've learned, what mistakes you've made, reflect on that, do it again. And then become professionalized, in whatever discipline that might be. So I'm really excited. That's why I'm drawn to universities like Prescott, and Prescott specifically, because I think this is the vanguard of the next stage of higher education.
And these people that you're teaching, how are they approaching these big challenges? This is a bonus question, if you like. Are they enthusiastic? Are they hopeful? Are they optimistic? Are they, or are they slightly daunted or even apathetic? Actually, I do know young people that are apathetic towards the challenge because it just feels so enormous and daunting, and they feel so alone in facing it.
Yeah, well, I think it runs the spectrum, right? Because we've got such a diversity of students across the different programs, and some, are feeling really daunted, and there is actually an increase in sort of mental health challenges among students, both undergraduate and postgraduate, in the States. And I know that's true in the UK as well. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with climate anxiety, with not necessarily being given the tools to be able to see a constructive, positive way that they can contribute to both their own sustainability and sort of the regeneration of society, right? So I think we recognize that, not that we have all the answers, but I think recognition is part of it, and then seeing where the curriculum can help meet those students where they need.
Yeah, but we're not going to leave it on that. We need something more optimistic.
Well, regenerative ranching. I love to know more about regenerative ranching.
I love regenerative ranching.
I want to be a cowboy, so I found my way.
Well, come visit Arizona. Plenty of cowboys here.
I can learn a thing or two. I love that.
The hope is that we can all ultimately become cowboys. I like that.
Why yes.
Not? I don't think that's the hope at all, right?
We want to. Shush, don't ruin our dreams. When it all goes tits up, the idea that we can go back to school and learn to become cowboys might be all we have.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly can do that here.
Dr. Pavel, thank you so much for being on Raw Green. It was very interesting. Let's see how things are going to evolve. I'm 100% sure that you do not have an easy job. We discussed that universities, whatever it is, their methodology, their approach, they're not having a very easy time at the moment. But there is hope, right? And it is good to have that at least.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's hope and there's action, right? And
yes, exactly.
I think everything that I've heard that you're doing right now, I think that genuinely does bring me hope, I have to say.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you both. I'll talk to you soon.
Great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Raw Green. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed it. So don't forget to hit subscribe and follow our podcast. It's an awesome way to support our community. At OBI, we're all about research, life cycle assessment, and the green tech innovation. Stay in touch through our socials or visit our website. Links are ready for you in the description. Catch you in the next episode. Ciao.